The mark of death. The great hall of the alien empire was silent. Thousands of alien eyes stared at one man, a human, standing alone in chains. His name was Corvin Ray. He looked weak, dirty, and tired. His face had bruises. His clothes were torn. But his eyes were calm. Too calm. At the center of the hall, on a high golden throne, sat the alien queen. She was tall and strange, with blue skin and silver eyes that glowed. Her long robes sparkled like stars. Everyone in the hall waited for her words. She stood up slowly. Her voice echoed through the room. This human is a threat to the Empire. He entered our sacred zone. He destroyed our ships. He will now face the highest punishment. The crowd roared with cheers. Creatures from 100 alien races shouted for blood. But Corvin did not move. He looked at the queen. And then he smiled. The queen's eyes narrowed. "Why do you smile, human? You are marked for death." Corvin raised his head and spoke, his voice low but clear. "Because you don't know what I left inside your palace." The hall fell silent. The queen's fingers twitched. Her guard stepped forward, ready to attack. But Corvin didn't stop. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." The queen raised her hand, signaling silence. "Enough. Take him away." 2 guards grabbed Corvin's arms. They dragged him through the metal doors, down into the dark prison levels beneath the palace. As the doors closed, the queen stood still, her heart beating faster. What did the human mean? Hours later, deep below the palace, the prison was cold and wet. The walls were made of black stone. Strange sounds echoed in the darkness. Whispers, cries, and growls from other cells. Corvin sat alone in his cell. His hands were still chained, but his eyes watched everything. He counted the guards. He watched the cameras. He felt the walls. In the cell next to him, an alien prisoner whispered through the cracks. "You're Corvin Ray, the human from Zone 9. Corvin didn't answer. "They say you walked into the radiation fields and lived. They say you stole something from the queen." Still, Corvin stayed silent. Then the alien whispered again. "So why did you come back?" Corvin finally spoke. "Because she has something that belongs to me." The alien laughed, a deep, strange sound. "You are crazy, human." Corvin leaned back against the wall. But in his boot, hidden from the cameras, was a small metal piece. A device. Round. Blue. Silent. He had smuggled it in, and it was still working. Flashback. 1 year ago. Corvin ran through fire and smoke. Alien soldiers chased him. Behind him, explosions shook the sky. He carried a child in his arms, an alien child with glowing silver eyes. She cried softly, her face covered in ash. "Hold on," he whispered. "We're almost safe." He had entered the queen's inner world by mistake, but what he found there changed everything. The queen had a child, hidden, protected, half-human. He couldn't leave her behind. Present time, back in the cell. Corvin closed his eyes. He remembered the girl's face, her little hand holding his, her voice calling him friend. And now, the queen wanted him dead. But he still had one last move. He tapped the device in his boot 3 times. Tick, tick, tick. Somewhere deep inside the palace, a signal was sent. Meanwhile, in the queen's private chamber, the queen sat alone, reading old data files. Corvin's words echoed in her mind. "You don't know what I left inside your palace." She opened a hidden screen. It showed security reports from the last hour. All clear. But then, something changed. A red warning light blinked. Unauthorized signal. Location: Level 13, Old Vault Sector. Her face went pale. No, it can't be. She stood up fast, knocking over a golden cup. Back in the prison, Corvin heard the alarms. He smiled again. The alien in the next cell asked, "What did you do?" Corvin whispered. I reminded her who she really is. Secrets in the cell. Darkness filled the lower prison levels like a thick fog. Some prisoners had forgotten time. Some had forgotten their names. But not Corvin Ray. He remembered everything. He sat on the cold stone floor of his cell, the blue light from his hidden device blinking slowly inside his boot. It was tiny, almost invisible, but strong. It had sent a silent message through the palace walls. A message only one person could understand. Suddenly, a voice came from the shadows, rough, deep, and curious. You are not what you seem, human. It was the alien prisoner from the next cell. His name was Rukai, an old warrior with glowing orange skin and scars across his face. He had survived 3 wars and escaped 2 death camps. He was known as a killer. But now his voice was different. He sounded interested. Corvin didn't answer. Rukai leaned closer to the small hole between the cells. They call you the ghost of Zone 9. Is it true? You walked into the black zone and came back alive. Corvin didn't move. His eyes stayed on the ceiling, counting the flickering lights. Rukai laughed quietly. I don't believe the stories. They say you entered the Queen's world and stole something valuable. What could a human steal from the most dangerous ruler in the galaxy? Corvin whispered back without looking. Not what. Who? The silence between them became heavy. Rukai stepped back slowly. He had heard many lies in his life, but this one sounded different. It didn't sound like a boast. It sounded like truth. Memory flickers. 1 year earlier, Corvin's hands were shaking. His shirt was covered in alien blood. He held a child, small, scared, with silver eyes that glowed in the dark. She clung to him tightly, her voice trembling. They'll come for me. My mother will come. He didn't ask questions. He just ran. Through fire, through metal gates, through the Queen's palace. He had no plan, just one goal. Protect her. Present, back in the cell. Corvin blinked away the memory. He checked the blinking light in his boot. Still working. Still sending. He looked at the wall. There, scratched into the stone, were hundreds of tiny lines. Not from him. From someone else. Another prisoner who had been here before. One line caught his eye. It wasn't a number. It was a word. She watches. He ran his fingers over it slowly. Then came a noise, a faint mechanical buzz in the distance. Guards, drones, or maybe her. Rukai whispered again. They say the Queen keeps her enemies close, that she doesn't kill them right away. She studies them, learns their weakness. Corvin smiled faintly. That's her mistake. High above, inside the Queen's chamber, the alien Queen stood in front of a wide glass wall, looking down at her empire. Her mind was not calm. The alert had come from level 13, a forgotten place, a place even she feared. That was where she had hidden it. The child. The truth. The mistake she could never erase. Corvin Ray had found it once. Now he was back. She turned to her assistant, a thin alien with sharp eyes. Send the shadow guard to the lower levels. No alarms. No light. I want the human watched. Yes, my queen. Should we prepare the execution chamber again? No, not yet. She walked toward a locked silver box, opened it slowly, and pulled out a small photograph, rare in this part of the galaxy. A photo of a girl with human eyes and alien skin, smiling, happy. Her hands trembled. Meanwhile, in the cell, the light in Corvin's booth stopped blinking. The signal was received. Now, he waited. He turned to Rukai. Do you want to get out of here? Rukai raised an eyebrow. No one escapes this place. Then I'll be the first. Corvin reached into his sleeve and pulled out a tiny wire, hidden deep in the seam. He inserted it into the wall socket behind the toilet. A soft click. Then, the lights flickered. And for 5 seconds, all security cameras went dark. Rook-Kai growled. How? Corvin just said. Friends in dark places. From down the hall, heavy footsteps approached. But it wasn't a guard. A small drone floated silently toward Corvin's cell. Black, marked with a human military symbol, not alien tech. It scanned his face, clicked, then buzzed a code into the cell door. Is DUR-UNLOCKET. Corvin looked back at Rook-Kai. Still want to stay? Rook-Kai stood, eyes wide. I'm coming. Together, they stepped into the hallway. But Corvin stopped. He looked at a locked gate marked with a strange symbol. 3 rings, spinning. He knew that symbol. She's behind that door. Who? Rook-Kai asked. Corvin looked at him. The one the Queen is afraid of. Then he walked toward the gate. The Queen's weakness. The Queen sat alone in her high chamber, a place few had ever seen. She wore her crown of stars, but her thoughts were heavy. The silver photo lay in her hand, half crushed. The girl, the child she had hidden from the world. Corvin Ray's face appeared on her screen again. He came back, she whispered. After all these years. She closed her eyes and remembered a time before she was queen. A time when she was not feared, but loved. Years ago, secret memories. She had traveled far in her youth, before the wars, before the crown. On a broken human colony world, she had met someone. A man with kind eyes and stubborn courage. A man who had saved her life when she didn't deserve it. His name was Corvin Ray. Now, prison level 13. Corvin stood in front of the old vault door, the 3-ringed symbol glowing faintly. Rook-Kai stayed behind him, nervous, gripping a stolen guard weapon. What is this place? Rook-Kai asked. Corvin didn't answer. He placed his hand on the scanner. The door hissed, then slowly opened. A wave of cool air rushed out. Inside, the lights were soft and blue. The air smelled clean, different from the rest of the prison. It was not a prison cell. It was a nursery. Toys. A small bed. Drawings on the wall. In the corner sat a young girl, about 10 years old now. Her skin shimmered softly, and her silver eyes sparkled even in the dark. She looked up and smiled. Uncle Corvin. Corvin dropped to his knees and hugged her tight. You remember me, he said, his voice breaking. Of course, she said. Mama said you'd come back someday. Rook-Kai stared in shock. That's the Queen's daughter. Corvin nodded. Half human, half Cerealian. The only one of her kind. The Empire would tear her apart if they knew. Rook-Kai looked at the girl with quiet awe. She looked peaceful, gentle, nothing like the Queen. Why did she hide her? He asked. Corvin sighed. Because love is weakness in this world. And the Queen, she couldn't show weakness. Elsewhere, the Queen watches. In her private chamber, the Queen watched them through a hidden feed. Her hands shook. She had placed the cameras there herself, years ago, not to spy, but to protect. Now she saw her past staring back at her. Corvin, the child. The truth she had buried deep. One word echoed in her mind. Weakness. What was it? Back in the nursery vault, Corvin gently took the child's hand. We're getting you out of here. Tonight. The girl looked nervous. What if Mama gets angry? She won't. Not this time. He turned to Rook-Kai. Get the elevator unlocked. I'll carry her. Rook-Kai moved fast, breaking into the side panel, wires sparking. But Corvin paused. He looked around the room once more, and in one corner, on a table, was something wrapped in cloth. He opened it. Inside was a small music box, human-made, old, broken in parts, but still playing a soft tune. His mother's lullaby. She kept this, he whispered. Memories crashed over him. The night he first gave that music box to her, before the war, before she wore a crown. He was the one who had loved her once. Flashback. The night before she became queen. In a quiet room lit by candles, the young alien girl had held the music box, amazed by the soft sound. Corvin had wrapped his arm around her shoulder. "When you feel alone," he told her, "this will remind you what love sounds like." Tears had fallen from her alien eyes. But the next day, war came. Power took her. She became the queen of the Cerulean Empire, and he became the enemy. Present. The decision. The elevator door opened. Rook-Kai gave the signal, but Corvin hesitated. "If we leave now," he said, "she'll send the fleet after us." "You still care about her?" Rook-Kai asked. Corvin didn't answer. He looked at the child, then at the camera in the corner. He knew she was watching, so he spoke to it. "You think hiding her made you strong, but strength isn't in what you protect. It's in what you stand for." He stared straight at the lens. "You can kill me if you want, but the galaxy will know. She's not a weapon. She's your daughter." Then he picked up the child and stepped into the elevator. Meanwhile, the Queen's heart. The Queen stood frozen. Corvin's words pierced her armor. In all the years she ruled with fear, no one had dared to speak to her like that. No one but him. And for the first time in decades, she felt it again. Not fear, not power, but love. Escape or die. The elevator moved slowly, rising through the deep prison levels of the palace. Each second felt like an hour. Corvin held the girl close to his chest. She was quiet, but he could feel her heart beating fast. Rook-Kai stood next to them, holding the stolen weapon tight. His eyes didn't blink. His hands didn't shake. He was ready to fight. Above them, alarms started to echo. Low at first, then louder. The red lights flashed. "They know," Rook-Kai said. Corvin nodded. "Let them come." He looked down at the child in his arms. "Are you scared?" She shook her head. "No, I have you." That one sentence made Corvin's throat tighten. He wasn't just escaping now. He was protecting a life that didn't belong in a cage. He was fighting for hope. Inside the Queen's war room, the Queen stood before a wall of screens. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. Guards ran in every direction. Commanders shouted orders, but she said nothing. Her assistant, pale and shaking, turned to her. "Your daughter is escaping with the human. Should we activate the death drones?" She did not answer. "My queen?" She turned slowly. Her voice was cold. "No, I want them alive." "But alive." The room went quiet. No one understood. Not yet. But the Queen was changing. The chase begins. As the elevator doors opened, Corvin moved fast. He knew the palace layout better than most aliens. He had memorized every corridor during his time as a spy. "This way," he shouted to Rook-Kai. They ran down narrow metal halls. The walls were marked with ancient alien writing. The floor shook with distant footsteps. Sirens screamed. Red lights turned every shadow into a warning. Behind them, black armored guards. Silent, deadly. The Queen's shadow troopers. Rook-Kai turned and fired. Blue sparks lit the air. One trooper dropped. Two more came forward. Corvin ducked through a side door. They entered a maintenance tunnel filled with steam and broken pipes. The child coughed from the smoke. "Hold on," Corvin whispered. "Almost there." He pulled out the blue device from his boot. It blinked fast now, receiving a new signal. The extraction ship was close. The hangar, final gate. They'd reached the outer hangar gate. On the other side was the open sky and freedom. But the gate was closed. A force field pulsed over it like a living wall of energy. "It's locked," Rook-Kai shouted. "They're sealing us in." Corvin looked around. Then he saw it, an old control panel halfway up the wall. Manual override. He handed the girl to Rook-Kai. "Buy me 2 minutes." He climbed fast, hands slipping from sweat and dust. Guards came in behind them. Blaster fire rained down. Rook Kai roared and charged. He wasn't just protecting Corvin now. He was fighting for something he didn't know he needed. A chance to matter. Corvin's choice. At the top of the panel, Corvin pulled the cover off. Wires sparked. Codes flashed. He moved fast, his mind racing. Suddenly, a voice came through the panel. Her voice. The Queen. Corvin. Stop. He froze. You'll get her killed. I'm trying to save her, he said. You're risking everything. So were you. When you had her. When you chose to keep her. Silence. Then she whispered softly. I still choose her. Corvin's hands stopped shaking. Then prove it. Let her go. He pulled the final switch. The force field dropped. The escape ship. From above, a human stealth ship descended fast. Black, silent, invisible to enemy radar. It landed hard. The hatch opening with a hiss. Corvin grabbed the girl and ran. Rook Kai limped behind him, bleeding but alive. They jumped aboard. As the ship lifted off, shadow troopers fired at its hull. But it was too late. They were gone. But not all made it. Inside the ship, alarms rang. One of the engines is hit. The pilot shouted. We'll never make light speed. Corvin looked around. Then at Rook Kai. Rook Kai understood. Leave me. No. You need to get her out. You're the reason she's alive. Go. Corvin hesitated. Then Rook Kai smiled. Really smiled. For the first time. I was born in war. Let me end in something better. He ran to the emergency gun turret, buying them time. Corvin closed the hatch and held the child tight as the ship turned toward the stars. Back in the palace, the Queen stood alone in the war room. They escaped. Her assistant nodded, scared. Should we send a fleet? The Queen walked to the window. Outside, the stars blinked peacefully. She thought of the music box, of Corvin, of her daughter's smile. No, she said. Let them go. Somewhere in deep space, Corvin sat in the dark cabin, the child asleep beside him. He looked at the stars. They were free now. But the war wasn't over. The truth wasn't safe. She let us go, he whispered. But why? Then he remembered something the Queen once said long ago. Power is fear, but love is something even stronger. The hidden truth. The ship flew silently through the black of space. No stars nearby. No signal. Just endless dark. Inside, Corvin sat beside the child, watching her sleep. Her silver eyes had finally closed. Her breathing was soft and steady. For the first time in years, she was free. But Corvin wasn't. Not yet. Haunted by the past. He couldn't sleep. Not with the Queen's voice still in his head. Not with the truth crawling beneath his skin like fire. She had let them go. Why? He stared at the blinking light on the ship's panel. It was a message. Encrypted. Human origin. Priority level. Black vault. Corvin hesitated, then pressed it. A hologram appeared. Not of the Queen. Not of any enemy. It was General Halver, a high-ranking officer from Earth's secret command. A man Corvin hadn't heard from in 4 years. Corvin, the general said, voice heavy. If you're seeing this, then you survived. And that means the Queen made her move. The message paused. Then the general said something that made Corvin stop breathing. We lied to you. Flashback. 4 years ago, Corvin stood in a human base on a distant moon. He was being briefed for a mission. Infiltrate the Xerelian Empire, gather intelligence, and eliminate the target known only as Subject A13. The file was locked. The reason was classified. The location. Inside the Queen's palace. Corvin had asked only one question. What is Subject A13? A hybrid, the general said. Born of human DNA and alien tech. Dangerous. If the Queen is hiding it, it's a threat to all of us. Back then, Corvin followed orders. But now, He knew. The girl. The one he had saved. The one sleeping beside him right now. She was Subject A13. Present. In the ship. Corvin stood slowly, his chest tight. He moved to the mirror in the small ship's washroom. He looked at himself. His reflection didn't show a soldier anymore. It showed a man carrying truth and guilt. "They sent me to kill her," he whispered. He remembered that moment in the Queen's vault. The child alone, scared, reaching for him with her small hand. And he had made a choice. "I won't follow orders anymore." The child wakes. The girl sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. "Are we safe now?" Corvin nodded. "For now." She tilted her head, sensing something. "You look sad." "I just found out something important," he said. She crawled across the seat and leaned against him. "Is it about Mama?" He hesitated. "Yes, and about you." She looked up, her voice soft. "I know I'm different." He was quiet. "She told me that people might be scared of me, because I'm not all human or all Cerealian." "She told you that?" "Yes, but she also said I'm special, that I could help the galaxy one day." Tears built behind Corvin's eyes. She was right. Meanwhile, back on the palace world, the Queen stood on her balcony. No guards, no advisors, just silence. Her hand held the old music box Corvin had once given her. She opened it. It played the broken melody, soft and sad. Behind her, a voice spoke. "You let them escape." It was Lord Varix, the Empire's prime strategist. Cold, sharp, loyal only to the throne. "The child is dangerous," he hissed. "Your blood mixed with human DNA. Do you know what the Council will do if they find out?" She didn't turn. "Let them come." "You are risking war. For a mistake." "She is not a mistake," the Queen said. "She is the only pure thing I ever did." Varix's face twisted in disgust. "Then you are unfit to rule." She turned finally, her eyes glowing with calm rage. "Then take the crown from me, if you can." Back on the ship. Another shock. Corvin activated the last part of the general's message. The image changed. This time, it wasn't Halver. It was a lab recording. A cold room, bright lights, and a small baby with silver eyes, crying. Behind the glass stood two figures, the Queen and Corvin himself. He stepped back from the screen. "No, that can't be." The recording continued. "Do you think she'll survive the merger?" the Queen asked. Corvin, his younger self, nodded. "She's not just a child. She's a bridge." The file ended. He stared at the wall. "I was there," he whispered. "I helped create her." He wasn't just her protector. He was part of what made her real. "The child speaks." She watched him. Her voice was small. "You knew me before I was born." He sat beside her. "Yes, I just didn't remember." "Do you still want to protect me?" He didn't hesitate. "With everything I have." The new enemy rises. Back on the palace world, Varix stood in the shadows, whispering to a private comm. "Begin Phase 2. A dark fleet of ships powered up beyond the moon. Unknown, unseen, not loyal to the Queen. Kill the Queen. Kill the girl. End this bloodline before it changes everything." The human decision. The ship hovered silently above a hidden moon. Fog covered the cratered surface. The stars above were cold, watching. Inside the ship, Corvin stood still. He had barely moved in an hour. The child, the girl with silver eyes, sat nearby, swinging her feet, watching him carefully. She could sense it. Something was about to happen. The message from Earth. A new signal arrived, marked with a flashing red triangle. "Earth Command. Priority Alpha." Corvin opened it. A familiar face appeared. General Halver. His voice was sharp, cold. "Corvin Ray, this is a direct order. Return the hybrid to us immediately. She is not safe in alien space. A retrieval team is on the way. Corvin didn't reply. Halvar's face grew harder. You were one of us. You took an oath. That girl was a military project. Classified. She is not your child. Those last words echoed. Corvin turned off the message. He looked at the girl. She was drawing something on a small tablet, 3 stars, and 2 hands holding each other. Did you hear that? She asked. Corvin nodded. They want to take me. Yes. Will you let them? He knelt in front of her. I don't know what I am to you, he said, but I will not let anyone hurt you. She smiled. Then you're my father. On the palace world. A throne shaken. The queen stood in her chamber, the crown off her head, her hands open at her sides. She had not slept in days. Her daughter was gone, but she wasn't afraid of that. She was afraid of what would come next. Her assistant ran into the room. My queen. Lord Varix has declared emergency rule. The council is backing him. They are calling for your arrest. Let them come. He's ordered your fleet to be grounded. The queen walked to the center of her chamber. She activated an ancient panel, one only a monarch could touch. Her voice was calm. Prepare the eternal code. Her assistant froze. That will trigger a total purge. If they want to destroy me, I'll show them what I still control. Meanwhile, the real enemy arrives. In the shadows beyond the moon, Varix's fleet emerged. Black ships, unmarked. Silent killers. Inside one of them, Varix spoke to a cold, gray-skinned creature with eyes like knives. Once the girl is captured, the queen will fall. The empire will be ours. The creature nodded. And the human. Kill him. Quietly. Back on the moon, a choice must be made. Corvin stood on the ridge above the crater, wind blowing across his face. The child stood beside him, wrapped in a warm cloak. She looked up at him. Will we go to Earth? No, he said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He had made up his mind. Not because he hated Earth, but because he had seen what love could do. And she was the last proof of that love. Suddenly, a ship roared down from the sky. Not 1, 3. Drop pods slammed into the moon's surface. Earth soldiers in black armor stepped out, weapons raised. Corvin Ray. One shouted. By order of Earth Command, turn over the hybrid child immediately. The girl squeezed his hand. What do we do? Corvin stepped forward, calm. She's not going with you. The soldier raised his gun. You'll be marked as a traitor to Earth. Then mark me. Before they could fire, another ship appeared, sleek, curved, and glowing blue. It was Cerulean. The queen had arrived. Mother and daughter reunited. The queen stepped down from the ship. She wore no crown, no guards, no weapons, just a long dark robe and tired eyes. Her daughter saw her and froze. Corvin gently let go of her hand. Go on. The child ran to her mother. The queen knelt and held her tight. For the first time in years, they were whole. A standoff under the stars. The Earth soldiers raised their guns. The queen's guards stepped forward from the ship. Lasers hummed. Tension rose. Corvin stood between both sides. No more fighting, he shouted. Can't you see? She's not a weapon. She's not a project. She's just a child. And she belongs to both of us. Halvar's voice crackled through the soldiers' comms. Kill the queen. Take the girl. But something unexpected happened. The lead soldier hesitated. He looked at the child. At Corvin. At the queen kneeling beside her. Then, he lowered his weapon. I didn't sign up to kill children, he muttered. One by one, the other soldiers followed. The queen's offer. The queen rose, her hand still holding her daughter's. I offer peace, she said. A child born of 2 worlds should not be the reason for war, but the reason we end it. Corvin looked at her, surprised. You mean that? Yes, she said softly. You taught me that love isn't weakness, it's choice. And I choose peace. But peace has a price. Suddenly, an explosion ripped through the sky. Varric's fleet had opened fire. A missile struck the Earth ship. Another headed toward the Queen's. "Get down," Corvin shouted. He tackled the child as debris flew past. The Queen shielded them both with her body. Smoke, fire, screams. From the flames, Varric's voice rang out through all channels. "No more peace. No more lies. The child dies tonight. Marked for legend." Smoke filled the air. The moon's surface shook as missiles rained down. Varric's ships blotted out the stars like shadows crawling across the sky. Corvin pushed himself up, coughing, his ears ringing. Around him, the ground was scorched. The Earth soldiers had scattered. Some hid, some were already gone. And in the center of it all, the child. She stood in front of the Queen, her tiny hands glowing, soft silver light pulsing like a heartbeat. Her eyes wide, not with fear, but power. A power awakened. Corvin stared in disbelief. What's happening to her? The Queen stepped forward, her voice shaking. It's starting. I tried to delay it, to keep her safe, but she's merging. Merging with what? Corvin asked. Herself, her human and alien halves. It was always going to happen, but not like this. Above them, another blast rocked the moon. Varric's voice echoed through loudspeakers. "Give me the girl, or we turn this moon into dust." The Queen looked at Corvin. "We don't have time." "Then let's finish this." The choice of a soldier. Corvin grabbed a blaster from the wreckage. His arm was cut. Blood ran down his temple, but he stood strong. "We make our stand here." The Queen reached into her robe and pulled out an ancient command crystal. This activates the last veil, a shield built into the moon's core. It can protect her, but it needs someone to stay behind, to power it manually. Corvin looked at her. "And you knew this?" She nodded. "I always knew one of us would have to stay. Then it's going to be me." The Queen stared at him in silence. "You still love her," she said, meaning the child. "Yes," he replied. "More than anything. Father, mother, child." The child came to them both now, her hands still glowing. "Are we going to die?" she asked. Corvin knelt beside her. "Not you. Never you. But one of you." He nodded. "Sometimes, love means protecting someone even when you can't stay with them." She didn't cry. Instead, she looked at them both. "Then I want to stay too." The Queen touched her shoulder. "You are not meant to die in war. You are meant to build what comes after." Varric strikes. Suddenly, a massive shape landed near them. Dust blew in all directions. A tall, armored figure stepped from the smoke. Varric's. His eyes glowed with hate. His armor was black and sharp like broken glass. "You let love make you weak," he said to the Queen. "No," she answered. "Love made me fight harder." Varric's raised his weapon. Corvin jumped in front of the child. The Queen raised her hand, but too late. Varric's fired. The shot flew toward Corvin and stopped. Mid-air, frozen, the child's power had awakened. Her silver light exploded outward, pushing Varric's back, cracking his armor, blasting his gun to pieces. The ground shook. Her voice was clear and strange. No more death. The final battle. Corvin turned to the Queen. "Get her to the escape ship. Now. What about you? I'll finish the rest." The Queen hesitated. "Yes," the Queen said softly. "Will we see him again?" The Queen blinked back tears. "In every peaceful place, you'll see him. Later, a new beginning." 5 years passed. The war ended. The Queen stepped down from power. The Empire turned into a council of worlds, human and alien alike. The child, now known as Lyra, grew strong, wise, and kind. She walked through cities rebuilt with peace in mind. Everywhere she went, people told her stories about the man who saved her. Not a king, not a general, just a human. Corvin Ray. Final scene. The monument. In the center of a shared world stood a tall statue, a man holding a small child in his arms. Behind him, a rising moon. At the base, a single line carved in every known language. He chose love and changed everything. Lyra stood before the statue, her mother beside her. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did he really smile when he died?" The queen looked at the stars. "Yes, because he finally became what he always wanted, a legend," the child asked. The queen shook her head. "No, a father."